Whether you're into comedians roasting each other's life choices or turning yesterday's bad decisions into today's funny stories, Amazon Music's got the most ad-free top podcasts, included with Prime. Download the Amazon Music app and get in on the joke. Or go to amazon.com/ad-free-comedy. That's amazon.com/ad-free-comedy to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
Hey everyone, I'm your host Peter Zablocki, and you're listening to History Shorts. I hope everyone's having a great day so far, and thank you for making this show a small part of that. If you'd like to help me out with a small gesture, please leave History Shorts a rating or a review, and click that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. For sources and books used as the basis for these episodes, how to advertise on the show, and other information such as a list of our upcoming guests on the Conversation series, or a link to our Patreon account where you can listen to exclusive episodes not heard here, please visit www.historyshortspodcast.com. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate podcast listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the globe, all in one place. Download Podcast Republic now and take your podcast experience to the next level. Having said all of that, when it first appeared on the American plains in the late 19th century, barbed wire was little more than a practical innovation, just some twisted strands of metal punctuated with sharp points. Yet within a few short decades, this humble invention would come to reshape the face of the American West, revolutionize land ownership, fuel violence, displace indigenous nations, and earn a chilling nickname, the Devil's Rope. Here is the rest of that story.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
In the decades following the Civil War, America's western frontier became a canvas of both opportunity and chaos. The Homestead Act of 1862 had opened up millions of acres of public land to settlers, promising 160 acres to anyone willing to live on and improve the land. Railroads pushed westward. Cattle drives ran up from Texas to Kansas. Immigrants poured into the Great Plains. And yet, for all their activity, one persistent problem haunted the settlers: fencing. The open range was an endless sea of grass. Wood was scarce, especially in the treeless plains of Kansas, Nebraska, and Texas. Stone walls were too expensive and labor-intensive. Hedges took years to grow. Yet without fences, crops were trampled, boundaries blurred, and property rights vanished in the dust. Cattle roamed freely, often following the trails of others for hundreds of miles. Conflict was inevitable. Farmers needed a way to enclose their land, cattlemen needed a way to direct herds, and ranchers needed to protect water sources. The stage was set for a simple innovation to upend the frontier. The idea of fencing with metal was not new. As early as the 1860s, various inventors experimented with wire fencing, hoping to mimic the thorny branches of natural hedges. Some used flat blades, others twisted metal into spirals. But it wasn't until 1873 that the breakthrough finally came, thanks to a man named Joseph G. Glidden of Illinois. Glidden was not a trained engineer, but a farmer. Observing a demonstration at a country fair where barbs were attached to a wooden rail, he saw a new possibility. Returning home, he twisted two strands of wire together and attached short lengths of sharpened metal using a coffee mill to create a consistent barb. The twisted wire not only held the barbs in place, but also made the wire much stronger and more resistant to sagging. Glidden filed for a patent in November of 1873 and received it in 1874. He partnered with a businessman named Isaac Elwood, and together they began mass-producing the new fence wire through the Barbed Fence Company. The barbed wire boom had begun. Barbed wire offered a revolutionary combination. It was cheap, easy to install, and extremely effective. The sharp barbs deterred both livestock and humans. A single roll could fence off large tracts of land quickly. By the late 1870s, multiple companies were manufacturing variants of Glidden's design, each claiming improvements or modifications. Dozens of patent battles ensued, turning the U.S. Patent Office into a virtual battlefield. But as production ramped up, barbed wire began to spread across the continent. In Texas, where the open-range culture had long reigned, ranchers quickly adopted the wire to enclose pastures. No longer did they need cowboys to ride the boundaries. In Kansas and Nebraska, farmers could finally protect crops from stray cattle. In the Dakotas and Wyoming, settlers marked their claims with endless lines of sharp steel. By the 1880s, millions of miles of barbed wire had been strung across the West. The once open frontier became a lattice of private property, regulated movement, and visible control. But not everyone welcomed this new order. The rapid spread of barbed wire triggered violent confrontations known as the fence-cutting wars. In regions where open-range ranching had been a way of life, large landowners and small cattlemen often clashed. Fences blocked trails to water, cut off migration paths, and divided communities. Some ranchers, particularly in Texas and New Mexico, refused to accept the new restrictions. They formed vigilante groups, sometimes called fence cutters, who rode at night with wire cutters in hand, slashing through miles of fencing in protest. In some counties, the violence became so severe that the state government had to intervene, passing laws to criminalize fence cutting and protect barbed wire property lines. In a particularly violent episode in 1883, clashes in Texas led to dozens of injuries and several deaths. Armed standoffs occurred between fence cutters and ranch hands. By the mid-1880s, entire counties were on edge, and law enforcement struggled to maintain order. Barbed wire, designed to enforce peace and order, had instead unleashed a war over land, access, and control. Perhaps the most tragic consequence of barbed wire's rise was its role in the final dispossession of Native American lands. Before fencing, many Plains tribes, especially the Lakota, Comanche, and Cheyenne, moved seasonally across vast territories, following buffalo herds and honoring spiritual landscapes. The U.S. government had already begun restricting this movement through forced treaties and military campaigns, but barbed wire brought the physical final blow. As settlers strung wire across the Great Plains, traditional migration routes were severed. Watering holes, sacred sites, and hunting grounds were now fenced off. For many indigenous nations, the wire was a visible symbol of colonial domination, a cold, sharp boundary that ignored centuries of spiritual and territorial claims. In some oral histories, barbed wire became known as the rope of the white man, a manifestation of theft, imprisonment, and betrayal. As buffalo populations collapsed and reservation systems intensified, the barbed wire sealed the fate of nomadic life. It turned the prairie from a shared ecosystem into a patchwork of enforced borders. If the American frontier was the proving ground for barbed wire, the battlefields of the 20th century were where it became synonymous with human suffering. By the time World War I erupted in 1914, barbed wire had become a standard military tool. European armies quickly adopted it for trench warfare, using it to defend positions, slow enemy charges, and trap soldiers in kill zones. Fields of barbed wire, sometimes layered 5 or 6 rows deep, became death traps. Soldiers, tangled and exposed, were cut down by machine gun fire or forced to crawl under a hail of shells. Wartime poets wrote about the wire with horror. Siegfried Sassoon, in a bitter reflection of trench life, described it as ghostly, glimmering snare, always ready to ensnare those who didn't expect it. During World War II, barbed wire became the face of another kind of horror, this time the concentration camp. In Nazi-occupied Europe, electrified barbed wire fences enclosed ghettos, labor camps, and extermination centers. The wire symbolized confinement, dehumanization, and death. It ringed prisoner of war camps in Japan and the Soviet Union. In every case, it marked a line not to be crossed, a barrier between the imprisoned and the free. Barbed wire had become the architecture of control. After the wars ended, barbed wire didn't actually fade, as you already know. It evolved. It became a fixture on ranches across the globe, not just the United States. In the American imagination, the wire retained its dual identity. For some, it represented law, order, and the taming of the West. For others, it was a symbol of loss, a stolen land, vanished cultures, and blood-soaked battlefields. It's etched into the mythology of American frontier, both as a tool of progress and a blade of separation. Thanks for listening.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience in their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's Libsyn, ads.com today.